Thomas's new trucks. It was a busy, bustling day on the Island of Sodor. The engines in their trucks were working very hard. Thomas was shunting trucks in the yard, but his trucks were old and rusty. It was very hard work. Then James arrived. "Look," James puffed proudly, "the Fat Controller gave me some smart new trucks. They're much nicer than yours." "It's not fair," moaned Thomas. "I want new trucks too." The next morning, the Fat Controller had a surprise for Thomas.
"Thomas, your trucks are getting too old for your heavy loads. You are to have some new ones, just like James."
Thomas was delighted. Thomas collected his new trucks and puffed proudly away. But when Thomas arrived at the docks, there was James. He was showing his new trucks to Bill and Ben. "I've got new trucks too," puffed Thomas. "They're even nicer than James's," puffed Bill and Ben. "Your trucks might be nice and new now," huffed James, "but you'll never keep your trucks as clean as mine." "Yes, I will," chuffed Thomas. "I'll have the cleanest trucks on the island." James watched Thomas puff away. The next day, Thomas puffed into the quarry. James's trucks were already loaded. "I've got my stone all ready," boasted James, "and not a spot of quarry dust on me." "I can do that too," pouted Thomas. So Thomas backed under the hopper, but just as the stone was released, Thomas's trucks chuckled. Then they rolled a bit more.
"Bother!"
huffed Thomas. "Ha!" puffed James. "Your trucks don't look so new now." Thomas was cross. Thomas puffed to the coaling plant. "This time, behave yourselves," Thomas snapped to his trucks. "I want you to stay clean." When he arrived, Thomas backed carefully and slowly under the coal hopper. But the trucks chuckled, then rolled too far again. Thomas and his trucks were dirtier than ever. Later, when Thomas arrived at the washdown, there was James. "See, I have got the cleanest trucks. You'll be here for hours getting yours cleaned," laughed James. Thomas was very cross. The next morning, when Thomas puffed into the yard, he had an idea. "If I use my old trucks to take the coal," he puffed, "my new trucks will still look clean and new." So Thomas backed up to collect his old trucks. He collected some coal from the coaling plant. Then he raced across the countryside. "Ha!" laughed Thomas. "I can get these trucks really messy and get the coal to the docks on time." Then there was trouble. The rusty coupling broke. Thomas's trucks were rolling by themselves. "Cinders and ashes!" cried Thomas. Thomas applied his brakes, but he stopped too quickly. The trucks bumped into the back of Thomas, and the coal spilled all over the tracks. Thomas was stuck. Soon the Fat Controller arrived on Harvey.
"Thomas, these trucks are too old for pulling coal,"
the Fat Controller said sternly.
"And now you have caused confusion and delay."
"Sorry, sir," said Thomas. Harvey and the workmen soon cleared the tracks. But Thomas still had to deliver the coal to the docks. So he raced back to the shunting yards. And this time he collected his smart new trucks. Harvey and the workmen loaded the coal into Thomas's trucks. Their new trucks were soon filthy, but they were filled with coal and ready to go, and they were very happy. Thomas raced to the docks. Suddenly the trucks weren't being troublesome. They rolled easily up hills. They rattled quickly down hills, and they sang all the way. Thomas raced into the docks. "We need to unload quickly," the dock manager called. "But don't worry, we'll try and keep your new trucks clean." "That's okay," puffed Thomas. "My trucks would rather be useful than clean." Just then, James puffed into the docks. "Look at your trucks," boasted James. "Filthy again, not like mine." James tried to pull away, but his troublesome trucks didn't want to be clean anymore. Hold back, they chuckled. Just then, Cranky's cable snapped. He dropped a large crate of melons. "Bother!" puffed James. "James," tooted Thomas, "I think trucks like to be useful rather than clean." And all the trucks agreed. Thomas and the new engine. The engines on the island of Sodor keep very busy. There are always lots of jobs to do. One morning, the Fat Controller came to Tidmouth's sheds.
"A new engine has arrived on the island,"
he announced.
"His name is Neville. You must all make him feel welcome. A happy engine is a useful engine."
Later, Thomas was stopped at a signal. The signalman called down to Thomas. "The bridge ahead is unsafe. Thomas, you are to collect a piece of ironwork so the bridge can be repaired." "Yes, sir," puffed Thomas. At the yards, Harry and Bert were with Neville, the new engine. Neville was a steamy, but he had a square body like a diesel. Neville was backing up towards some trucks. "Nearly there," said Harry cheekily. "Nearly there," said Bert naughtily.
Then there was trouble.
"Watch where you're going, clumsy wheels," Harry and Bert laughed. Neville looked sad. "It's not our fault you're a silly steamy," oiled Bert, and they laughed even harder. Thomas arrived at the yards. He could see Harry and Bert laughing with Neville. That must be the new engine, he thought. He must be friends with the diesels. Thomas arrived at Knapford Station. "Have you seen the new engine yet?" asked James. "Yes," said Thomas, "but we'd better be careful. I saw him at the yards with Harry and Bert. They were laughing together." James was shocked. A steamy friendly with diesels. As Thomas left, Edward pulled in. "Have you heard about the new engine?" snorted James, and he started to tell Edward all about Neville. Later, Edward was taking on water. He was talking to Percy. "That new steamy Neville is best friends with the diesels," Edward puffed. "He doesn't want to be with steamies at all." "How do you know?" peeped Percy. "James told me and Thomas told him," whistled Edward. Then later, Percy met Emily at a red signal. "Don't go near Neville, the new engine," he told her. "The diesels have told him to biff into steamies." Edward told me. James told Edward, and they all heard it from Thomas. When Thomas arrived at Abbey Station, the Fat Controller was there.
Thomas, you must warn all engines not to cross the bridge until it is repaired,
he boomed. Thomas felt proud. It was a very useful job. Just then, he heard a whistle. Someone was coming. Thomas had to warn them. It was Neville, pulling Annie and Clarabel. Thomas was shocked. Annie and Clarabel were his carriages. "Hello," puffed Neville cheerfully. "I'm not talking to you," Thomas huffed crossly. Neville didn't know what he had done. Then Emily pulled in next to Neville. "Hello," said Neville happily. Emily let out a whoosh of steam. "It's no use trying to make friends with me. I know you're going to biff into all the steamies, just like Harry and Bert told you to." Thomas was surprised, but the station master blew his whistle, and Neville puffed sadly away. "Where did you hear that Neville is going to biff into all the steamies?" Thomas asked Emily. "Don't you know?" Emily whistled. "Percy told me, Edward told Percy, James told Edward, and you told James," huffed Emily. "But I only said to James that I'd seen Neville with Harry and Bert." Then Toby arrived. "Have you heard about Neville, the new engine?" he puffed. "Henry saw Harry and Bert be horrible to him at the yards." Emily was shocked. Thomas couldn't believe it. Neville wasn't friends with the Diesels after all. "Where was Neville going?" Emily tooted. "Cinders and ashes," cried Thomas. "Neville's heading for the broken bridge. I must stop him." Neville was speeding through the countryside as fast as he could. Suddenly, Neville saw a barrier on the track. He slammed on his brakes, but it was too late. Neville was in terrible trouble. He was on the broken end of the bridge. Thomas knew it was all his fault. Suddenly he had an idea. Thomas steamed slowly and carefully onto the bridge. He gently bumped Clarabel and was coupled up. Thomas was very scared. Slowly and steadily he began to pull Neville back from the edge. The bridge made a creaking noise. Thomas knew he must hurry. He pulled as hard as he could, and with one big puff, he pulled Neville's wheels off the bridge. Thomas had done it. He had saved Neville and Annie and Clarabel. "Thank you," whistled Neville. "I should have warned you," puffed Thomas, "but I was too busy believing silly stories. I thought you didn't like steamies, but now I know I was wrong." Thomas gave Neville a long, friendly toot. Neville was very happy. At last he knew he had a good friend in Thomas. The island of Sodor is surrounded by beautiful blue sea. It has fields of green and sandy yellow beaches. There are rivers, streams and lots of trees where the birds sing. There are windmills and a coal mine and docks where visitors to the island arrive. The island also has lots and lots of railway lines. Who's that puffing down the track? It's Thomas. Hello, Thomas. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Island of Sodor. Percy and the oil painting. The Island of Sodor is a very special place. It has hills and valleys, fields and forests. All of the Fat Controller's engines love the Island of Sodor. One day the Fat Controller came to Tidmouth Sheds. He had splendid news.
The mayor has invited a famous artist to paint a picture called The Spirit of Sodor. It will be put on show at Knapford Station,
Boomed the Fat Controller.
Percy, you must collect the artist from Brendam Docks and show him all the most beautiful places.
Yes, sir, said Percy. Thomas was excited for his friend, but Percy was worried.
What's the Spirit of Sodor?
Asked Percy. Thomas thought. Everything that is special about the island, he said. No one knows the island better than you, he puffed, and no one loves it more than you. You're just the engine for the job. Percy felt better. He would show the famous artist somewhere very special, somewhere that was the spirit of Sodor. When Percy arrived at Brendam, the docks were very crowded. Everyone wanted to see the famous artist. He had paper and an easel. He had pots of paint and bags of brushes, a long smock to keep his clothes clean, and a big black hat. Percy thought he looked very important. The famous artist climbed on board Percy. I want to see the spirit of Sodor, he said. Please show me somewhere special. Yes, sir, puffed Percy happily. And he steamed out of the docks as fast as he could go. Percy puffed across the island. Somewhere special, he chuffed. At last, Percy came to Shen Valley. It was very beautiful. There you are, sir, cried Percy happily. The Spirit of Sodor. The famous artist had a very long look. Too green, he said. I want you to show me somewhere special. Percy was surprised. He thought Shen Valley was very special. But the artist was very famous and very important. Maybe Shen Valley isn't special after all. Percy set off again. He would show the famous artist somewhere else special. Percy came to Norrumby Beach. The sun was shining. Children were playing in the sand. There was even a donkey giving rides. Percy was sure the famous artist would want to paint it. Here we are, sir, he puffed. All the children love Norrumby Beach. The famous artist looked at Norrumby Beach. He held his paintbrush and his palette. The sand is too yellow, he sighed. I want you to show me somewhere special. This upset Percy. He thought Norrumby Beach was the most cheerful place on the island. He wanted to tell the famous artist he was wrong, but all he said was, yes, sir, and set off sadly again. Percy took the artist to the viaduct, but the famous artist said, too tall. Then Percy took him to the windmill. Too round, said the famous artist. Finally, Percy took the famous artist to Knapford Station. There were engines and carriages, porters with packages, and loudest of all, the happy noise of passengers coming and going. Percy thought it was the most wonderful sight of all. Here, sir, said Percy proudly. Isn't this the Spirit of Sodor? Too busy, the famous artist sighed. Why, I do believe there's nothing special to paint on this island at all. Percy was so cross his boiler bubbled, and he went as red as James. Gordon thought the artist was very rude. Everywhere on Sodor is special, peeped Percy. And so are the people and the children and the engines. We are all special. Then he wheeshed some steam. His steam blew the artist's hat into the air. I want to see Sir Topham Hatt right away, the famous artist cried. Percy was sure he was in trouble now. Percy waited and worried. The Fat Controller came to Knapford at once. I have found the perfect thing to paint, cried the famous artist.
What is it?
Asked the Fat Controller. I am going to paint Percy, said the famous artist.
Bust my buffers!
Percy gasped.
You want to paint me?
Percy is honest, hard-working and helpful, and he is not afraid to speak his mind. He is surely the spirit of Sodor, said the famous artist. And the Fat Controller agreed. And so the famous artist painted Percy. And on the night the painting was to be shown for the first time, all the engines were there. When the mayor pulled a cord to show his picture, Percy gasped. I told you you were the best engine for the job. Thomas smiled, and Percy smiled too. He was very proud to be the spirit of Sodor. The island of Sodor is surrounded by beautiful blue sea. It has fields of green and sandy yellow beaches. There are rivers, streams, and lots of trees where the birds sing. There are windmills and a coal mine and docks where visitors to the island arrive. The island also has lots and lots of railway lines. Who's that puffing down the track? It's Thomas. Hello, Thomas. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Island of Sodor. Tuneful toots. The little engines of the narrow gauge railway were always busy. They went uphill and downhill all day long. Rusty's favourite journey was by the lake. He liked to toot his horn there. The sound echoed around the hills. Rusty's horn was special. It had 2 notes, one high and one low. Rusty thought he had a very tuneful toot, but the other engines thought it was the worst noise they'd ever heard. And that made Rusty sad. One morning, the thin controller, Mr. Percival, had a special announcement to make.
Sir Topham and Lady Hatt are to visit our railway this evening,
he said grandly.
This is a very special occasion, so a brass band is coming to play for them,
Mr. Percival added. The engines were very excited, but Rusty was most excited of all. He loved the sounds of a brass band. There was a lot to do. Skarloey and Rheneas brought tables and chairs. Duncan and Peter Sam brought apples and pears from the orchard. And Rusty was to take the brass band on a tour of the hills before the concert. When Rusty pulled into the transfer yards, Mr. Percival was waiting with the brass band. Rusty couldn't help but toot his horn high and low. At that moment, Thomas chuffed into the transfer yards with the bandstand. What was that wonderful sound? Puffed Thomas. That was Rusty, Peter Sam. He thinks his horn is special, but we don't. Well, I think it's special, wheezed Thomas. This made Rusty very happy. No one had ever liked his horn before. Rusty, the brass band are ready for their tour of the hills, called Mr. Percival. Yes, sir, hooted Rusty. The brass band was soon on board and Rusty pulled quickly out of the station. Don't be back late, Mr. Percival called after him. But Rusty didn't hear. He was tooting his two tones loud and clear. I'm going to give the brass band the best tour ever, he said. Rusty took them to the top of the highest hill. Then they went to the viaduct. Then he took them to the trestle bridge. It would soon be time for the concert. The band started to tune their instruments. The sound of their notes filled Rusty's funnel. He was very happy. So happy, he forgot all about getting back for the concert. I know, thought Rusty. Now I'll take the band to the lake. He wanted this trip to go on forever and ever. Rusty happily clickety-clacked towards the lake. His horn was toot-tooting to the music of the brass band. He wished all the other engines could hear him now. The ruined castle looked magical in the sunset. Rusty's tuneful train crossed the lake. Then there was trouble. Rusty shuddered to a stop. Rusty had made a terrible mistake. He had gone too far, and he had run out of diesel oil. Now the brass band wouldn't get back for the concert. This was a disaster. Thomas chuffed into the transfer yards with the Fat Controller and Lady Hatt. Mr. Percival looked very unhappy. Rusty had not returned with the brass band. Everyone was very worried. The band leader was very worried too. How will anyone know where we are? He asked Rusty. Suddenly, Rusty tooted very loudly. If you all play and I toot my horn very loudly, our sound will echo all the way down to the yards. Then everyone will know where we are. The band leader was happy. He waved his baton. 1, 2, 3, he called. The band started to play, and Rusty tooted his two tones louder and prouder than ever before. Thomas was the first to hear the sound. That's Rusty, he puffed. And the brass band, Duncan chuffed. Everyone listened. They could hear Rusty's two-toned horn echoing down the valley. They must be in trouble, whistled Thomas. Follow the sound of Rusty's horn, Thomas wished, then you'll be able to find him.
If the brass band is with Rusty, said the Fat Controller, we'll have the concert there.
Everyone thought this was a wonderful idea, especially Mr. Percival. The brass band played as loudly as they had ever done. Rusty was sure the whole of Sodor could hear them. Then he saw engine lamps coming towards them. Rusty was surprised. All the engines were arriving at the lake, and none of them was telling him to be quiet.
We have come to hear the concert, boomed the Fat Controller.
We heard your horn, puffed Peter Sam.
So we knew where to find you, chuffed Duncan.
Because you have the most special-sounding horn of all, wheezed Skarloey. I shall never be shy about my special horn again, Rusty tooted.
Let the concert begin.
All the engines blew their whistles, and Rusty tunefully tooted his two-tone horn loudest of all. The island of Sodor is surrounded by beautiful blue sea. It has fields of green and sandy yellow beaches. There are rivers, streams and lots of trees where the birds sing. There are windmills and a coal mine and docks where visitors to the island arrive. The island also has lots and lots of railway lines. Who's that puffing down the track? It's Thomas. Hello, Thomas. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Island of Sodor. Respect for Gordon. The engines of the Sodor Railway were always busy. Thomas puffed to the beaches with happy holidaymakers. And Gordon proudly pulled the express. Gordon thought he was the strongest, fastest and cleanest engine on the whole of the railway. But one thing bothered him. His firebox rattled as it cooled down at night. Gordon knew his rattle stopped the other engines from getting to sleep. That night, Gordon's firebox went click-clunk, click-clunk. Thomas and Percy started to chuckle.
Rattler Gordon's keeping it all awake,
peeped Percy.
The only engines keeping other engines awake,
Puffed Gordon crossly.
are little engines with very bad manners.
But secretly he felt rather embarrassed. In the morning, Percy teased Gordon again.
Rattlebox is awake at last,
He puffed out loud. Gordon ignored Percy. He did not like being called names.
I'm the strongest and the best,
He told himself.
strongest and best, cleanest and fastest, and pull the express.
He wished the other engines would remember that. Later, Gordon pulled into Knapford Station. Oh, look, laughed Emily. Rattler Gordon's here. He's pulling the Click-Clunk Express.
This made Gordon very cross indeed.
Especially because Diesel overheard. I hope your click-clunk gets better soon, oiled Diesel. See you later, Rattler.
Gordon was very cross indeed. He decided it was time the other engines learned to treat him properly.
So later at the water tank, he pulled up ahead of James. James was surprised. At Knapford, Percy had brought Gordon's coaches into number 1 platform.
Off you go now, Percy, said Gordon. Number 1 is my platform.
Little engines shouldn't hang around.
You're a boastful, bossy, big blue boiler,
Percy muttered to himself crossly. Later, Gordon told his friends to give a polite toot toot whenever they saw him. But why? Asked Thomas. He was very puzzled.
Because,
Puffed Gordon grandly,
I'm the strongest and the best.
And he steamed away. You can toot at him if you like, wished Emily, but I'm not going to. Gordon steamed across the island. He felt very pleased with himself. He was sure the other engines would forget his clunk-click and treat him properly now. He saw Emily coming. He listened for her toot-toot, but Emily didn't toot at all.
This made Gordon very cross. He was so cross that he didn't see the signal telling him to stop. And he didn't see the goods train ahead until it was too late.
Luckily, no one was hurt, but Gordon came off the rails. He was covered in gooey red jam. As Gordon waited to be put back on the rails, Percy arrived.
Hello, Gordon.
Peeped Percy.
I see you're not the cleanest engine anymore.
Then James puffed up.
I don't think you'll be pulling the express for a while, Gordon,
joked James. Finally, Thomas arrived. Gordon's a mess, Gordon's a mess. He's the largest and jammiest, puffed Thomas cheekily. At last, Gordon was back on the rails. He felt very foolish indeed. Edward pushed him to the fitter's yard. Gordon had to stay at the fitter's yard for a long time. It was hard to get the jam out of his engine. Emily and Henry took it in turns to pull the express for him. One evening at Tidmouth Sheds, Henry huffed,
"It's hard work pulling the express."
"Yes," agreed Emily. "Gordon must be very strong to pull the express so fast."
"I miss Gordon,"
peeped Percy.
"I miss having his rattle to go to sleep by."
Gordon knew the other engines were pulling the express for him.
Thank goodness for Emily and Henry, he thought. I'm sure they're doing a very good job.
Finally, Gordon was as good as new. The fitters had even managed to fix the rattle in his firebox. That evening, Gordon had something to say.
"Is it about being the fastest and the best?"
teased James.
"Not at all," puffed Gordon. "I know my rattle kept you awake at night, and I'm sorry. And I was also silly about the TOOTS. I realise now that engines toot other engines because they work hard and deserve it, not because they ask for it."
"But we think you do deserve it, Gordon," said Thomas, "because you work hard and you are a really useful engine." All the other engines agreed. Now all the engines greet each other with a cheerful toot toot for all the hard work they do on the Fat Controller's railway. The island of Sodor is surrounded by beautiful blue sea. It has fields of green and sandy yellow beaches. There are rivers, streams and lots of trees where the birds sing. There are windmills and a coal mine and docks where visitors to the island arrive. The island also has lots and lots of railway lines. Who's that puffing down the track? It's Thomas. Hello, Thomas. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Island of Sodor. Molly's special. It was a blustery day on the Island of Sodor. Thomas was excited. He was on his way to meet a new engine called Molly. She was waiting as he pulled into the yards. Molly was bright yellow. She had great big wheels and a shiny funnel. She looked very smart. "Hello," Thomas puffed cheerfully. "Hello," Molly chuffed back, but Molly looked sad. "What's the matter?" asked Thomas. "Emily laughed at me because I have to take empty trucks to the coaling plant," Molly puffed sadly. "I want to take full trucks like a really useful engine." This made Thomas feel sad. How can I help Molly feel important? He thought to himself. Then he saw some tarpaulin flapping in the wind. This gave Thomas an idea. Molly reversed the empty trucks into a siding. Thomas asked Molly's driver to cover her trucks with a tarpaulin. With your trucks covered up, no one will know they are empty, puffed Thomas. We can make everyone think you're carrying a special delivery. Then I will feel important, Molly chuffed cheerfully. Later, when Thomas saw Emily at the station, he told her all about Molly's special. What is it? Asked Emily. Not telling, Thomas puffed. But it's the most special of all. And every time Thomas saw another engine, he told them all about Molly's special. Soon, all the engines were talking about Molly's special. They were excited, except Gordon.
It won't be as important as my express,
Gordon huffed. Molly's special is much more important than the express, puffed Thomas. And you'll see it tonight at Abbey Station. But then Thomas was worried. How can I make Molly's trucks look even more special than Gordon's express? He wondered. Later that evening, Thomas saw a station master lighting lanterns. This gave him another idea. Can I borrow your lanterns? Thomas puffed to the station master. Of course, the station master replied. Soon Thomas's trucks were filled with the lanterns, and he puffed away to find Molly. Soon Molly's trucks were decorated with the beautiful lanterns. She was taking the trucks to the coaling plant for a very important job. Your trucks look very special now, puffed Thomas. You must go through Abbey Station. Lots of engines will be there to see you. The lanterns on Molly's trucks twinkled like stars in the night. When Thomas and Molly arrived at Abbey Station, Emily, Percy and Gordon were waiting. Percy gasped. She looks magnificent, exclaimed Emily. And for the first time since she'd been on Sodor, Molly felt special. But not for long. A strong gust of wind blew one of the tarpaulins in the air. Oh no, gasped Thomas. Now everyone could see there was nothing inside.
Those trucks are empty,
Gordon huffed.
I knew it couldn't be as important as the express.
So there isn't a special, Percy puffed sadly. Molly felt silly and not very important at all. So she puffed away as fast as she could. Thomas felt very bad. Just then, the Fat Controller called the station master. And the station master came to see Thomas. There are lots of engines waiting at the coaling plant. They're waiting for Molly's trucks. Oh no, moaned Thomas. I've got to find Molly quickly. Molly had stopped in a siding. She looked very sad. I'm sorry I made you look silly, puffed Thomas, but they are waiting for your empty trucks at the coaling plant. But I've nearly run out of coal, moaned Molly. Don't worry, puffed Thomas. I can help you get there. So Thomas pushed and Molly pulled. Thomas and Molly worked together. And they arrived at the coaling plant in no time at all. There were lots of engines waiting for them. They needed the empty trucks to start their nighttime deliveries. Your empty trucks were important after all, puffed Thomas. Molly felt so proud it made her axles tingle.
We need even more trucks,
chuffed Henry. I'll get them, Molly chuffed cheerfully. And I'll help, puffed Thomas. Molly filled up with more coal, then Molly and Thomas raced back to the yard. They collected some more empty trucks and they puffed quickly away. Gordon was stopped at a junction. His signal had turned to red. "Out of the way," puffed Molly. "Empty trucks coming through." "You see," laughed Thomas, "sometimes empty trucks are more important than your express." Gordon's face went as red as the signal, and Molly felt more special than special.